The film begins by showing a tense scene set in a prison, where a notorious mobster named Lee is being held captive. As a police officer conducts an interrogation behind the bars of his cell, a sudden commotion erupts. A fellow inmate, armed with a mop, attacks a guard and grabs his gun. A fierce firefight ensues. Taking advantage of the confusion, Lee seizes the opportunity to strike. He ambushes the police officer from behind and takes his gun. With the guards distracted and preoccupied with the violent uprising, Lee easily escapes from his cell. He then liberates the other prisoners and arms them with the weapons of the fallen guards. As the rebellion unfolds, the prison is plunged into chaos and bloodshed. Prisoners and guards engage in brutal shootouts, leaving both sides decimated. Lee, however, remains unscathed and emerges as the leader of the rebellion. He rallies the remaining prisoners and they continue to fight, leaving no guards standing. 2 months after the prison rebellion, a fisherman named Romley discovers a man stranded on the coast of a small island. The man is injured and unconscious when Romley finds him, so he takes him to the nearest hospital. There, the man is treated by a doctor named Eileen. When the mysterious man begins to recover, he wakes up but with no memory of his past. He doesn't remember how he ended up on the beach or even his own name. Eileen, realizing that the man needs a temporary name, decides to name him Ishmael, after the protagonist in the classic novel, Moby Dick. As Ishmael continues to recover, Eileen makes a shocking discovery. She discovers that Ishmael's amnesia may have been caused by a bullet wound to the head. Furthermore, she notices that Ishmael's body bears numerous scars and wounds, indicating that he had been through intense physical trauma, possibly from fighting or torture. Despite this, Eileen remains determined to help Ishmael and provides him with the best care possible. Romley, too, is willing to open his home to Ishmael and help him as best as he can. Meanwhile, Lee and his 2 henchmen, Rika and Bassi, meet with the leaders of a rival gang, Anto and Bondi, to discuss their business dealings. Despite being rivals, Lee had been supplying firearms to Anto's gang. However, Anto is dissatisfied with the last shipment, feeling that the weapons were of inferior quality. As a result, Anto plans to break off their cooperation and kill Lee. Additionally, Anto sees this as an opportunity to gain a reputation among criminal gangs by taking out a powerful figure like Lee. However, before Anto's men can carry out their plan, Bassi and Rika strike first. They carry out a ruthless massacre against Anto's gang, leaving almost none of them alive. Anto himself is not spared, as Lee personally kills him by plunging a chopstick into his neck. Bondi, one of Anto's men, is the only one who manages to escape the carnage. Lee spares his life in exchange for information about a man found on the coast. Bondi reveals that his informant had reported that the man had connections to Lee. The next day, Lee sends Bondi to investigate the identity of the man. Bondi finds out that the man is currently hospitalized and goes to see Eileen to ask for more information. However, Bondi's questioning is harsh and intimidating, leaving Eileen feeling threatened. At the same time, Ishmael is also in the hospital, recovering from his injuries. When he sees Bondi threatening Eileen, he immediately comes to her rescue. He is able to overpower Bondi and could have killed him if Eileen hadn't intervened. After Bondi is defeated and leaves, Eileen shows Ishmael the X-ray results, which reveal that there is a bullet lodged in his skull. She urges him to go to the capital city for treatment, as the hospitals there have better facilities and it would be safer for him to undergo surgery there than on the small island. The following day, Eileen sets out to find a hospital in the capital that can provide better care for Ishmael while he waits on the island. However, they are unaware that Lee and his men are watching them as they head to the bus stop. They assume that Ishmael is traveling with Eileen on the bus, but in reality, he only accompanies her to the stop. After receiving word that Ishmael and Eileen are on the bus, Lee's men move quickly to set up an ambush, blocking the road with a car. When the bus stops, they hijack it, killing the driver and taking Eileen and a little girl as hostages. All the other passengers are killed. When Ishmael and Romley receive a call from Eileen, they rush to the scene of the attack, only to find the passengers brutally murdered and Eileen missing. There are still some of Lee's men present, and they are determined to kill Ishmael. Faced with this dire situation, Ishmael and Romley must use all of their skills and resources to rescue Eileen and the little girl, while also evading the deadly pursuit of Lee's men. After a fierce and brutal fight, Ishmael manages to kill his enemies. However, in the process, Romley sacrifices his life protecting Ishmael from a bullet aimed at him. Ishmael is left with no time to grieve Romley's death as the police arrive at the scene and take him into custody. Sometime after, Lee's men bring Eileen and the girl to their base, which is located in a bunker deep in the forest. Bondi, who is with them, is extremely uncomfortable with the conditions of the place, and he keeps complaining and making comments about it. His constant chatter eventually becomes too much for one of Lee's men, who, fed up with Bondi's complaints, kills him to silence him. Meanwhile, Ishmael arrives at the police station and is met by the chief interrogator, Samsul. Samsul reveals to Ishmael the true identity of Lee, a ruthless mobster who is not only feared by the general public but also among underground criminals. But what's even more terrifying about him is that he often kidnaps children and brainwashes them, training them to be assassins and enforcers. Rika and Basi were once two of the children that Lee had managed to train, and they are incredibly loyal to him, even willing to die for him. Ishmael was filled with confusion and shock as the police revealed to him that he had been one of the children kidnapped and trained by the ruthless mobster, Lee. He couldn't understand how or why he had ended up separated from Lee's criminal syndicate, and the police were equally puzzled. Their theory was that Ishmael had rebelled against Lee, and that's why the mobster had put a hit out on him. Just as Ishmael was about to ask the police more questions, the lights in the station suddenly went out and gunshots rang out from outside the interrogation room. His partner, Samsul, quickly rose to investigate but was met with a shocking and gruesome fate. An assassin, sent by Lee, had been waiting outside the window with a machete. In a swift and deadly move, the assassin slashed Samsul's face, killing him instantly. The assassin with the machete, assured by Ishmael's bound hands, entered the interrogation room with a sense of triumph. But Ishmael, fueled by a desire for revenge, put up a fierce fight, using his cunning and training to outsmart his opponent. Despite being handcuffed, Ishmael managed to defeat the assassin and secure his freedom. With his hands free, Ishmael quickly grabbed Samsul's handgun, using it to shoot down the other assassins who had entered the station. He was determined to take down Lee and his criminal empire, and he wouldn't let anyone stand in his way. He killed two of Lee's powerful henchmen, Tejo and Tano, in a brutal fight despite being overwhelmed at first by their strength and numbers. When the attackers are defeated, Ishmael takes a moment to catch his breath but is soon interrupted by the sound of a ringing phone. It was Tejo's phone and Ishmael decides to answer it. To his surprise, on the other end of the line was Lee himself, calling to check in on the status of the mission to eliminate Ishmael. As Lee realizes that his men have been killed and Ishmael is still alive, he changes his tone and offers a deal, sending Ishmael to the location of his base and promising that if Ishmael wants to save Ayaleen, he would have to go there alone. Determined to save Ayaleen, Ishmael sets out on foot towards the location provided by Lee, navigating through dense forests and rugged terrain that proved impassable by motorbike. He pushed on through the night, driven by his determination until he finally stumbled upon a dry well. As he looked into the well, memories of his past flooded back to him. He remembered that long ago, he and the other children kidnapped by Lee had been thrown into the well and left to suffer without food or water. Lee had deliberately subjected them to this cruel test, using it as a way to select the strongest and most ruthless among them. Every few days, Lee would drop a single bottle of water into the well and tell the children that the only way to survive was to kill each other for it. Only the last child standing would be rescued by Lee and taken out of the well. As Ishmael reflected on his past, he realized that the selection process in the well was a regular occurrence for Lee, a way for him to build soldiers for his criminal syndicate. Ishmael, along with Basi and Rika, were just three of the many children who had been forced to participate in this sickening battle royale. Just as Ishmael was beginning to piece together his memories, he was startled to see Basi approaching him from the shadows. Ishmael tried to convince his former friend to turn against Lee and join him in his quest for justice, but Basi was loyal to the mobster and refused to betray him. He saw Ishmael as a traitor and couldn't allow him to live. Thus began a fierce struggle between the two as they fought for survival and for their differing beliefs. The duel between Ishmael and Basi was intense, with Basi using his baton to strike at Ishmael, making it difficult for him to defend himself. But Ishmael was determined to survive, and he found an opportunity to strike back, hitting Basi on the head with his own baton. The blow was not fatal, but it was enough to incapacitate him. Basi stumbled towards the coast, where he collapsed and died. As Ishmael prepared to leave the beach, he was caught off guard by the sudden arrival of Rika, who had been sent by Lee to eliminate him. She fired her gun at Ishmael, but her shot missed its mark. Ishmael quickly took cover behind the reef and waited for Rika to come closer. As she approached, Ishmael sprang into action, grabbing her gun and pointing it at her. When they faced each other, Rika revealed that she had been the one who had shot Ishmael and caused his amnesia. Despite this, Ishmael couldn't bring himself to harm her as they had once been close. So, he decided to release her and told her to leave the place. But Rika, seeing Ishmael's compassion as a weakness, pulled out a gun that she had tucked into her shoes and pointed it at him. However, as she prepared to pull the trigger, she found that she couldn't bring herself to shoot him. Instead, she closed her eyes and fired her gun deliberately wide, missing Ishmael. In the midst of the panic, Ishmael tried to fend off Rika's shots, but one of his movements resulted in him accidentally throwing his knife forward. It ended up hitting Rika's stomach and mortally wounding her. Ishmael tried to comfort her as she lay dying in his arms, but there was nothing he could do to save her. A moment later, Rika passed away. Meanwhile, at Lee's headquarters, Ayaleen manages to seize a henchman's rifle when he was about to violate her. She then shoots the henchman dead and takes the girl held captive with her to escape. While they were looking for a way out, they encountered some of Lee's henchmen who were on guard. Eileen killed a few of them, but the guards were numerous enough for her to face alone. Just as it seems all hope is lost, Ishmael arrives, gun in hand, and begins to shoot Lee's men, saving Eileen. Initially, Eileen is hostile towards Ishmael, as she knows that he is a former member of Lee's syndicate and that he was the reason she was kidnapped. But Ishmael convinces Eileen that he has repented and left the criminal world behind. He is no longer a part of Lee's syndicate and wants to make amends for his past actions. Ishmael urges Eileen and the girl to quickly leave the bunker, but just as they are about to make their escape, Lee arrives, furious that Ishmael has killed two of his favorite henchmen, Bassi and Rika. Ishmael knows that he has no choice but to fight Lee, even though his own body is already wounded and exhausted from the previous battles. Their fight was brutal, swift, and intense, with Lee having the upper hand thanks to his strength and experience. However, as the fight progresses, Lee's stamina begins to drain, and he becomes increasingly overwhelmed by Ishmael's attacks. Recognizing that he would not be able to defeat his opponent, Lee attempts to flee outside to ambush Ishmael. However, his plan ends in failure as Ishmael manages to catch up with him. In the final moments of their confrontation, Ishmael impales Lee on a sharp tree trunk, putting an end to the mobster's reign of terror. By the end of the film, Ishmael has been treated for his injuries, including the bullet lodged in his skull. He is seen recovering in a hospital in the capital, with Eileen by his side, waiting for him to regain consciousness. Eventually, he wakes up from his coma, and Eileen is relieved to see him alive. Ishmael shares with her that his real name is Abdi, but he prefers to be called Ishmael. He asks Eileen not to change his name, as it represents a new beginning for him and a way to leave his past behind.